Welcome to Thalira Tales, where stories bloom in silence, carrying emotion, mystery, and hidden truth. Step in and let the tale unfold.
The exact moment my husband lost all the color in his face, he was standing in our backyard with a paper plate in one hand and my divorce petition in the other, while the barbecue grill smoked behind him. Our neighbors had fallen into a dead silence. His pregnant mistress stood beside him in a pale pink sundress, one hand resting on her belly, while he stared at the last page as if it had grabbed him by the throat. He looked at me and whispered, "Claire, what have you done?" And I remember that I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said, "I protected myself, Carter, since it was clear you weren't going to do it." But that came later. The beginning of it all, the part that broke something inside me forever, started on a Tuesday afternoon in late May on our street in Oak Brook, Illinois. You know the type of subdivision I mean, right? Brick colonials, pristine driveways, geraniums hanging from porches, men in brand-name sneakers meticulously tending to their lawns as if their lives depended on it. Women who wave from the mailbox and ask if you want the recipe for the lemon pound cake they brought to the Sunday block party. Quiet, predictable, safe, or at least, that's how it had always seemed to me. Carter and I had lived there for 18 years. We bought the house when our daughter, Sarah, was 11, and our son, Austin, was 8. Back when Carter still reached for my hand in the Home Depot parking lot, back when we thought growing old together would be an endless succession of backyard barbecues and grandchildren at Christmas. Maybe one of those little RVs, once he finally slowed down enough to enjoy it. By that Tuesday, Sarah was living in Boston, working in hospital administration. Austin was in Chicago selling software, always talking way too fast whenever he called. Carter was 52. I was 49, married for 27 years. Enough time to know the difference between a rough patch and actual rot. Still, I hadn't allowed myself to see the rot completely. That afternoon, I was in the kitchen washing strawberries in the sink when I heard the rumble of a diesel engine outside. I looked out the window and saw a moving truck backing into the driveway of the empty house next door. I remember thinking, well, good, let's hope they're decent people. The house had been empty for almost 6 months since old Mr. Henderson died and his son sold it. It was a good house, not huge, but solid. 2 stories, exposed brick, dark green shutters, white trim, and a maple tree in the front yard that turned a brilliant orange every October. I dried my hands on a dish towel and stood there for a second, watching 2 men in navy polos start unloading lamps and boxes. None of it seemed important yet. At 5:30, I made myself a turkey sandwich and sat at the kitchen table with a glass of iced tea, going over some accounting files on my laptop. I still handled a chunk of the office work for Carter Construction. Not as much as before, but enough to keep the books balanced. Carter had always said I was better with the details than he was. That phrase would come back to haunt him later. Shortly after 6, I heard his SUV pull up. That was unusual. He was rarely home before 7. I looked up from the laptop as he walked through the kitchen door. He smelled of sunshine, sawdust, and that mint gum he chewed whenever he was trying to hide another scent. He tossed his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and said, way too casually, "You're home." I almost laughed. "I'm not a hologram." He didn't smile. He loosened his shirt collar and glanced out the window toward the house next door. That was the first little click inside me. That look wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was more like anticipation. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, fine." He went to the fridge, opened it, stared into it for a second without grabbing anything, and shut it again. "Actually," he said, "I need you to come with me." "Where?" He nodded toward the house next door. I set down my glass. "Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I want to introduce you to someone." The tone of his voice made my stomach drop. I stood up slowly. "Carter, who?" He didn't answer right away. He just said, "Let's go." There are moments in life when your body understands something before your mind does. This was one of them. I followed him out the back door. We crossed our patio and stepped through the gap in the hedges that separated our yard from the neighbors. The lawn had just been mowed. I could smell the fresh grass and the gasoline from a mower someone was running further down the street. The miller's sprinkler made a rhythmic clicking sound. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and went quiet. It felt like any ordinary summer evening in the suburbs. And then I saw her. She was standing on the back porch of the house next door, one hand resting on the railing, the other resting on the curve of her belly. Young, early 30s maybe. Blonde hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, white sandals, a pink sundress stretched tight over a pregnancy bump that wasn't huge but undeniable. She had the kind of beauty that comes from knowing exactly how to arrange your face when people are looking at you. And she was looking at me like she was nervous, like she expected me to throw something at her. Carter stopped beside me. "Claire," he said, "this is Lauren Reynolds." I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. No one spoke for maybe 2 seconds, but it felt much longer. Then Lauren gave me a small, tight smile and said, "Hi." I didn't say it back. "Who is she?" Carter let out a breath like I was forcing him through some exhausting chore. "She's pregnant." The world didn't spin or go blurry the way they describe it in the movies. Mine got sharper, crueler. I noticed the chipped paint on the corner of the porch step, the gold chain around Lauren's neck, a tiny stain of barbecue sauce on Carter's shirt cuff from lunch, or some restaurant, or someone else's kitchen. I even noticed the sound of an airplane passing overhead. I said very clearly, "Pregnant." "With whose child?" Carter looked me dead in the eye. "Mine." I've relived that moment 100 times. And what still astounds me is how serene his face was. Not ashamed. Not remorseful. Serene. As if he were informing me that the roof needed replacing. Lauren looked down not out of guilt, I think, but out of discomfort. There's a difference. I felt all the blood drain from my arms and legs, but I stayed standing. Then Carter said the next thing. "I bought this house for her." I stared at him. He pointed toward our kitchen window. Toward our own house, as if the geography explained everything. "It makes sense," he said. "This way I can be close. It'll be easier." "Easier," I repeated. "For everyone." That almost made me laugh. The sheer audacity of the word. I looked at Lauren again. Her hand was still on her belly, her thumb slowly rubbing the fabric of her dress. I remember thinking, he has built an entire second life right next to mine, and he thinks I'm the one who needs to accommodate it. Carter squared his shoulders and dropped into what I can only call his business voice, the one he used with subcontractors when explaining how things were going to be done. "Here is the situation," he said. "I don't want any drama. We can handle this like adults." "Like adults?" I repeated. "Yes," he continued. "You can stay married to me if you want. I'm not kicking you out, but Lauren is going to need help, especially later on. Meals, some light cleaning, maybe running errands. She shouldn't be stressing for a single second." I genuinely thought I had misheard him. "Excuse me?" He frowned impatiently. "You heard me." Lauren finally spoke, very softly. "Carter, maybe this isn't." He cut her off without even looking at her. "It's fine." Then he turned back to me and delivered the line that burned itself into my brain. "She is pregnant with my son. Serve her or leave. Serve her." As if I were an employee. As if I were just a middle-aged woman whose only remaining function was to make his mess more comfortable for him. The rage that washed through me then was so clean it almost steadied me. Not a loud rage. Not a wild rage. A freezing cold rage. I looked at Carter, this man I had cooked for, covered for, and worked beside for almost 3 decades. The man whose books I had balanced, whose children I had raised, whose parents I had brought casseroles to when they got sick. And I saw him, perhaps for the first time, without any excuses around him. Exactly who he was. Not confused. Not having a midlife crisis. Arrogant. He truly believed I was too worn down by routine and history to do anything but absorb the humiliation. What he didn't know was that for almost 3 months, the numbers had been whispering to me from spreadsheets and bank statements. Small things at first. Missing transfers, payments to vendors that didn't add up, cash withdrawals that made no sense. I hadn't confronted him because I kept hoping there was an innocent explanation I hadn't found yet. Standing there, looking at his mistress on the porch of the house he had planted next to mine like a flag, I knew there wasn't going to be an innocent explanation. I didn't scream. I didn't insult Lauren. I didn't ask the kinds of questions women ask in the movies while the soundtrack swells. I simply turned around and walked back across the yard. Behind me, Carter said, "Claire, don't be childish. I kept walking. Inside the house, the air conditioning hit my skin and made me shiver. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I walked straight to the dining room sideboard, where I had stashed a manila folder the night before. I had put it there after meeting with Mitchell Davis, the lawyer my friend Denise had recommended. At the time, I still wasn't sure if I was just being paranoid. I just wanted to be prepared. Prepared. That word makes me smile now. I pulled out the folder and walked back to the patio door. Carter had followed me halfway across the yard. Lauren had stayed where she was, one arm crossed over her body, suddenly looking less confident in the plan. I stepped out and held the folder out to him. He looked at it. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," I said. His eyebrows shot up. He had expected begging. Maybe tears. Maybe negotiations. He had not expected paperwork. "Are you serious?" I gave the folder a little shake. "I've already signed them." For the first time all afternoon, he looked unsettled. He snatched the folder from my hand and flipped open the cover. "You had these ready?" "Yes." His eyes skimmed the first few pages. Terms of dissolution, division of assets, the dry, formal phrasing that makes the end of a marriage look almost tidy on paper. He didn't read carefully. Carter never did. He skimmed, he assumed, he signed. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Wow." I said nothing. He looked up at me. "You think you're going to scare me with this?" His jaw tightened. "Fine. Maybe this is better. Keep things cleaner this way." Cleaner. There was that word again. He tapped the folder against his palm. "I'll have my guy look it over." I nodded. And because I wanted him to hear it, to really hear it, I said, "Make sure you read all the pages, Carter." He smirked. "I know how to read." I looked him dead in the eye. "We'll see about that." He frowned at that. But before he could reply, Martha, the neighbor from across the street, walked by with her golden doodle, waving as always. "Oh, wow," she called out cheerfully. "Looks like the new neighbors are moving in." Carter's posture shifted in an instant. Friendly, relaxed, public. "Sure looks like it," he called back. I stood beside him, the late afternoon sun warming the side of my face, and realized that no matter what happened next, I was done protecting his image, done helping him look like a decent man, done carrying a shame that belonged to him. I watched Martha keep walking, her dog pulling at the leash, and I thought, you have no idea what just happened on this porch. But she would soon, because Carter had taken the papers, because he thought the last page was just standard boilerplate, and because he hadn't realized yet that I was no longer a woman he could give orders to. When I walked back into my kitchen after handing Carter those papers, I didn't fall apart. I didn't smash plates, or call my sister, or pour myself a massive glass of wine. Even though every cell in my body wanted to do at least two of those things, I washed the strawberries I had left in the sink. That's how shock works for me. Ordinary motions. My hands under the cold water, the red fruit rolling against the stainless steel. The faucet running a little too long. Outside, I could hear Carter talking in a low voice. Then the door of his SUV slammed. A minute later, the back door of Lauren's house shut too. I stood there, staring out at the maple tree between our yards, and thought, so this is my life now. I wish I could tell you I felt brave right away. I didn't. I felt sick, humiliated, old. Yes, I'll be honest. Not old in years old in that specific way a woman feels when the man she built a life with decides she's become part of the furniture, while a younger woman gets all the fresh paint and promises. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop still open to the accounting files. A line of numbers blurred on the screen. I closed the lid and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes until I saw little flashes of color. Then I got up and locked the back door. That night, Carter didn't come in until almost 10 o'clock. I was in bed, but awake, lying on my side in the dark with the TV off and the ceiling fan making that soft ticking sound it had made for years. I heard him moving around the kitchen. I heard the ice dispenser. I heard a cabinet door open. Then his footsteps came down the hall. He stopped in the bedroom doorway for a second before turning on the lamp. I sat up against the headboard and looked at him. He had changed clothes. A clean polo, jeans, smelling like mint gum again. His face was calm, but there was irritation underneath it. Like I had complicated something he wanted to be simple. "We need to talk," he he said. I almost laughed. That would have been helpful around noon. I kept the thought to myself. He sat in the armchair by the dresser instead of on the bed. Distance. That told me a lot. I know this hasn't been ideal, he said. Not ideal, I winced. You know what I mean, he said. No, actually I don't. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke slowly, like he was explaining math to a stubborn child. This doesn't have to be nasty. Lauren is in a delicate situation. Stress is bad for the baby. I'm trying to keep things stable. I stared at him. Stable for who? For everyone? There is no everyone, Carter. There's you, your mistress, and the wife you just told to cook and clean for her. His jaw tightened. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. He looked away for a second, then back at me. Claire, we both know this marriage hasn't been working for a long time. They must teach that line in a seminar for cheating men. I said, a bad marriage is not a hall pass to rob me and humiliate me in my own backyard. His eyes locked onto mine then, just for a split second, but I saw it. Fear. Small, but there. Don't start with the accounting, he said. The room got very quiet. I kept my voice steady. What about the accounting? He stood up, way too fast. You always do this. You spin these stories in your head. You make assumptions. You build an entire case out of nothing. I folded my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see how badly I wanted to point a finger at him. Then it should be easy for you to explain it. I am not doing a forensic audit in my bedroom at 10 o'clock at night. That's fine, I said, because I already did one somewhere else. He froze. There it was again. That little shift in his face. Then he recovered, gave a short laugh, and said, You're bluffing. Maybe a part of me had been, right up until that exact second, but hearing him say it hardened something inside me. He picked up the divorce folder from the dresser. I'll have someone look this over. He stared at me for another second and then said, Are you making a mistake? No, I said. I think I made one in 1999, and I'm fixing it now. He left after that. He slept in the guest room. I heard the door click shut and the mattress groan around midnight. I didn't sleep much either. Around 1:30 inches the morning, I got up, walked barefoot to the kitchen, and stood in front of the fridge without knowing why I had gone in there. The digital clock on the stove read 1:34. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing by on Route 83 inches the distance. On the wall next to the breakfast nook hung our wedding photo. I had stopped actually seeing it years ago. It had just become part of the room. But that night, I looked at it for a long time. Me in satin sleeves and a veil that looked massive now. Carter, younger, thinner, smiling like he'd won the lottery. We got married at a church in Hinsdale on a warm June afternoon. My dad cried. Carter's mom wore a peach-colored dress and told everyone she looked like a movie star, which was generous. And standing there in my nightgown at 49, looking at the photograph of a woman who still believed that if she worked hard enough and loved consistently, her marriage would be safe, I said out loud, very softly, What happened to you? At first, I meant Carter. Then I realized I also meant myself. The next morning, I called Mitchell Davis from my car in the Trader Joe's parking lot because I didn't want Carter to hear me from the house. Mitchell had one of those voices that made you feel more grounded just by existing near it. 60-something, maybe. Clear diction, measured, no drama. He ran a family law practice in downtown Chicago and had already reviewed the first stack of documents I'd brought him the week before. I told him what had happened. There was a pause on the line. Then he said, I'm sorry, Claire. That simple sentence almost broke me more than Carter's cruelty had. I gripped the steering wheel and watched the shopping carts rattling across the asphalt. He told me to serve her, I said, and hearing it out loud made it sound even uglier. Mitchell let out a slow sigh. All right. Then we move faster. He asked if Carter had signed anything yet. No. He took the folder. Good, Mitchell said. I almost smiled. Lawyers have a very different relationship with the word good than the rest of us do. He told me to keep gathering documents and not to confront Carter about the money again until we had everything lined up. Let him underestimate you, he said. Men like your husband make mistakes when they think they're in control. That line stuck with me, because Carter had underestimated me for years. Not loudly, but in quiet, everyday ways. He would say things like, "Claire handles the little details," as if the little details weren't the only reason his business stayed afloat. He would joke at dinner parties that I was basically his unpaid CFO, and everyone would laugh, including me, sometimes, because that's what wives do when they're trying not to make people uncomfortable. Now, all those little details were lined up on my dining room table in manila folders. Bank statements, vendor invoices, property deeds, wire transfers. And then came the discovery that hit me harder than the infidelity itself. 2 days after the scene on the porch, I found the withdrawal codes. I was home alone. Carter had gone to a job site in Naperville or so, he said. The rain was tapping gently against the kitchen windows all morning, and I was sitting at the table with a yellow legal pad, my laptop, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I was tracing a wire transfer through one of the company accounts when the origin code for a linked withdrawal caught my eye. It shouldn't have been there. That account wasn't supposed to be touched. I clicked on the archived statement, and there it was. A massive payout from our 401k. Not just his. Ours. A second transfer came from the savings account we had kept open for Austin in case he ever wanted to go back for his MBA. We hadn't closed it because life is long and kids change their minds. Carter knew that. He knew exactly what that money meant. My throat closed up so fast I had to stand. I pushed the chair back and walked to the sink, one hand over my mouth. The rain smelled like metal through the cracked window above the counter. Somewhere in the house next door, I heard a hammer, probably one of the movers, or a handyman assembling furniture for Lauren's beautiful new life. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had reached into the future we built for our family and pulled out the cash to furnish a lie. I stood there shaking, staring out at the wet backyard, and for the first time, I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. I wasn't. If anything, I had been reacting far too softly. That afternoon, Carter sent me a text. "Did you make dinner?" I stared at the screen. A second message popped up right after. "Lauren is nauseous. Soup would be good." I actually laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound in an empty kitchen. Then I took a screenshot, saved it, and forwarded it to Mitchell. After that, I drove into the city with another box of files in my trunk. Mitchell's office was in a solid brick building in the Loop. Not flashy, just established. When I got there, the receptionist offered me coffee, but my stomach was too tied in knots. Mitchell spread the statements across his conference table and put on his reading glasses. He didn't use legal jargon to impress me. That's why I trusted him. He just pointed a pen at the 401 withdrawal and said, "Here is where he crossed a line." Then he tapped the property records for the house next door. "And this proves where the money went." I looked at the papers. I keep wondering if reporting him makes me vindictive. Mitchell leaned back. "Claire, protecting yourself is not vindictive." I didn't say anything, so he added softly, "If you stay quiet and this blows up, you could end up answering for part of it. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your name is on the accounts and you handled the books. Silence won't protect you." That sank in. Because beneath the humiliation and the anger, that was the truth I had been trying to avoid. If Carter's financial mess detonated, the shrapnel would hit me too. I thought of Sarah in Boston, calling every Sunday. I thought of Austin in Chicago, still asking me for his dad's favorite chili recipe. I thought about what would happen if my kids found out not only that their father had betrayed me, but that I had helped cover it up. I said quietly, "I won't do that." Mitchell nodded once. Then he pulled a single sheet of paper from a file I hadn't seen yet and slid it across the table toward me. "This," he said, "is what we're going to attach to the very end." I looked at it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It was just precise. A notice. A summary. A record of financial irregularities linked to the purchase of the neighboring property and the marital accounts, worded clearly enough to make a man like Carter tremble the second he realized what he was holding. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Mitchell, and for the first time since that Tuesday, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt ready. I left Mitchell's office that afternoon with a fresh folder on the passenger seat and a strange calm settling in my chest. It wasn't peace not yet, but it was clarity. The sky over Chicago had that pale, grayish-blue tint that comes right before a summer thunderstorm. Traffic was crawling on I-88, and I remember sitting at a red light, watching a couple in the car next to me argue about directions while a pop song played faintly on their radio. Ordinary life. That's what struck me the most. The world hadn't stopped just because my marriage had shattered. People were still buying groceries. Kids were still riding bikes on the sidewalks. Somebody somewhere was probably complaining about the price of gas. Meanwhile, I was carrying documents that could dismantle the man I had built half my life with. I didn't feel triumphant about it. I felt exhausted. But beneath the exhaustion, something else was taking root. Something solid. For 27 years, I had been the person who made things smoother, quieter, easier for Carter. If a contractor was angry, I talked him down. If the books were messy, I balanced them. If Carter forgot to make a reservation for our anniversary, I laughed it off and made spaghetti instead. I had always believed that being a good partner meant absorbing the friction, but driving home that day, I realized something. Carter hadn't misunderstood my kindness. He had mistaken it for weakness. And that mistake was about to cost him dearly. When I pulled into the driveway, his SUV wasn't there. Next door, however, there was activity. The garage door of the house was open. A guy in a Home Depot apron was wheeling a boxed crib up the driveway, while Lauren stood nearby, talking on her phone, one hand resting on her belly. She already looked comfortable, as if she belonged there. For a moment, I just sat in the car and watched them. The scene might have looked sweet to anyone driving by. A pregnant young woman getting ready for a baby, a new house, a fresh start. Except the house had been paid for with money gutted from our retirement and from Austin's college fund. The anger that rose up in me then wasn't loud or chaotic. It was ice cold. I opened the car door, got out, and walked toward my front porch. Lauren noticed me, hesitated, and then gave a small wave. "Hi," she said cautiously. I didn't wave back, but I did stop. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other across the property line. Up close, she looked younger than I had initially thought. Maybe 29, 30 at the most. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, and there was a slight sheen of sweat at her hairline from the humid Illinois air. "You live next door," she said, as if we hadn't already established that. "I do." She shifted her weight. Carter said things were tense. I almost smiled at the word. "Tense," I repeated. She looked back toward the garage, where the guy with the crib box was disappearing inside. "I didn't want things to happen this way," she said. There it was. The line the other woman always says. I leaned one shoulder against my porch railing and looked at her. "You are pregnant by a married man," I said calmly. It was never going to be neat. Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth as if to say something else, but then Carter's SUV turned into the driveway. He parked, got out, saw the two of us standing there, and immediately scowled. "What's going on here?" "Your neighbor and I were just talking," Lauren said quickly. Carter walked over, his eyes darting between us as if trying to read the temperature of the moment. He turned to Lauren. "You don't need to talk to her." The way he said it hit me like a slap. Not, "You don't need to argue," or, "This isn't the time." "You don't need to talk to her." As if I were a nuisance. A leftover problem. I stood up straighter. "I was just going inside," I said. Carter looked relieved, as if he had successfully managed a PR crisis. That relief irritated me more than if he had yelled. I walked past him and opened the front door. Before stepping inside, I turned back. "Carter?" He looked over. "Make sure you read all the pages." His mouth tightened. "Claire, knock off the drama." He turned his back on me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again with the folder Mitchell had given me. The last page was sitting on top. Simple, direct, legal language, but clear enough for anyone with half a brain to understand the risk. I read it one last time, then slipped it into the very back of the divorce packet. The plan itself wasn't complicated. Mitchell had advised something very simple. Patience. Let Carter feel confident. Let him believe he was still steering the ship. People who think they've already won, Mitchell had said, rarely read the fine print. The next few days proved him right. Carter started acting almost cheerful. Not affectionate, those days were clearly gone, but relaxed, in the way a man gets when he thinks a difficult conversation is over and done with. He moved the rest of his clothes into the guest room, but kept walking in and out of the main house freely. Sometimes I heard him outside, helping Lauren carry groceries or assembling patio furniture. Once, on a Thursday afternoon, I saw them together by the mailbox. She laughed at something he said, and his hand rested lightly on her lower back. I watched from behind the kitchen blinds for a moment before turning away. I wasn't jealous. That phase had burned off completely. What I felt instead was colder. Observation. Carter also started talking about the future as if the divorce were a done deal. On Friday night, he walked into the kitchen while I was making tea and said, "I'm thinking of having a barbecue this weekend." I turned around slowly. For what? To introduce Lauren to the neighbors. I nearly dropped the kettle. He said it so naturally, as if this whole situation were just a lifestyle adjustment. "You want to throw a party?" I asked carefully. "To introduce the woman you got pregnant while married to me?" He shrugged. "People are going to find out anyway. Better to control the narrative." I stared at him. There was a time when Carter's confidence had impressed me. He had always been the guy who walked into a room like he already owned it. Now, I saw it for what it was. Hubris. "You're unbelievable," I said. He smiled faintly. "You'll see. It'll be fine." "Oh, sure. Everyone loves a barbecue." He grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter. "And honestly," he added, "it'll show people that we're handling this like adults." The sentence hung in the air between us. "We." I nodded slowly. "When is it?" "Saturday afternoon." "Perfect." Because by Saturday afternoon, everything would be ready. Mitchell had already filed the preliminary paperwork. The financial summary was locked and loaded. All I had to do was wait. Saturday arrived warm and bright, the kind of Midwestern summer day where the air smells like fresh-cut grass and charcoal smoke. By 2 o'clock, Carter had the grill going in the backyard. I watched from the kitchen window as he flipped burgers and set up folding chairs on the lawn. Lauren sat in the shade of the maple tree, holding a glass of lemonade. Around 3, the neighbors started trickling in. Martha from across the street, John and Lisa from the corner house. The Millers, a couple who had moved in last year and whose names I still sometimes forgot. People brought bowls of potato salad and 6-packs of beer. Everyone was trying to act normal, but curiosity was buzzing just beneath the surface. They all knew something highly unusual was happening. They just didn't know the specifics yet. Carter worked the grill like he was hosting a corporate retreat. "Burgers are almost up. Grab a drink. Beautiful day, huh?" Lauren smiled politely at everyone. Some neighbors smiled back. Others looked deeply uncomfortable. Around 4 o'clock, Carter walked up onto the back porch where I was standing. "Did you bring the papers?" he asked in a low voice. I held up the manila folder. "Yeah." He nodded. "Good." His confidence was almost breathtaking. Almost, because in a few minutes, when he reached the final page, that confidence was going to evaporate. And when it did, it was going to happen in front of everyone. Carter took the folder from my hand like it was just another invoice from the office. That was the thing about him after years of running a construction business. Paperwork didn't intimidate him. Contracts, permits, vendor agreements. He signed things every day without a second thought. To him, paper meant business, not consequences. Behind him, the backyard hummed with low conversation. Someone cracked open another beer. The grill hissed and popped as grease dripped onto the coals. A lawnmower droned somewhere down the block. It was the kind of soft suburban soundtrack you stop noticing after a while. But in that moment, I noticed everything. Martha was standing by the patio table, holding a paper plate. John was leaning against the fence, talking quietly with his wife. A couple of kids from the next block were chasing each other across the grass. And Lauren was sitting under the maple tree, a hand on her stomach, watching Carter with hopeful eyes. Carter flipped open the folder. "You didn't get cute with the lawyers, did you?" he asked lightly. I didn't answer. He scanned the first page. The division of assets, the legal formatting, the same dry tone of any standard petition. He smirked. "Pretty straightforward." "I figured you'd see reason." He turned the page. "You're staying in the house for now?" he asked. "That's what it says." He shrugged. "Fine by me." He turned another page. Around us, the conversations continued, though a little quieter now. People were pretending not to watch, but they were watching. You could feel it in the air. Carter flipped another page. Waiving alimony? He murmured. Well, that's generous of you. I said nothing. He turned another page. The wind shifted slightly, blowing the smell of charcoal and grilled onions across the porch. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed a little too loudly, then stopped, realizing nobody else had joined in. Carter reached the last sheet of paper. For a second, he didn't react. His eyes scanned the page once. Then again, the smug smile vanished. His shoulders went rigid. What is this? He said. His voice had dropped an octave, not loud enough for everyone to hear, but sharp enough that the chatter closest to us began to die down. I stepped closer, so only he could see my face clearly. Keep reading. His jaw clenched tight. This isn't part of a divorce settlement. No, I said quietly. It's not. He read the paragraph again. Slower this time. The document was simple. A summary of financial transfers from joint marital accounts and retirement funds linked to the purchase of the neighboring property. Documentation proving that the money used for the house next door had been moved without my consent. And a formal notice stating that this information had already been provided to legal counsel and the relevant financial authorities for review. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Carter's face went completely pale. Claire, he whispered. What is this? The yard was almost entirely silent now. Martha had stopped mid-bite, her fork hovering near her mouth. John shifted his weight against the fence. Someone quietly set a beer bottle down on the patio table. I spoke calmly. It's a record. Of what? Of the money you moved. His eyes locked onto mine. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it out here. He looked back down, scanning the page faster now, desperate for a loophole, a typo, something he could dismiss. There has to be a mistake, he muttered. A digit. You're blowing things out of proportion. I don't think I am. His breathing had changed shallower now. He turned slightly, shielding the paper with his body, and lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. You're making a fool of yourself with this. I almost smiled. Carter still thought public embarrassment was the worst possible outcome. He hadn't yet realized that looking foolish was the least of his problems. Behind him, Lauren stood up from her chair. Carter? She called softly. He ignored her. You actually sent this somewhere? He demanded. Yes. Where? Does my lawyer have it? His eyes darted around. You brought lawyers into a misunderstanding? A misunderstanding, I repeated. Then I spoke just a little louder, letting the dead silence of the yard carry my voice further than I intended. You drained our 401k, Carter. Several heads snapped completely around. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Carter's voice jumped. Keep your voice down. Why? It's private? You made it public when you bought a house next door for your pregnant girlfriend. That landed. A ripple went through the small crowd. Lauren stepped forward quickly. Carter, what is she talking about? He spun toward her. Nothing. She's twisting things. I raised one hand slightly. I'm not twisting anything. The bank statements are crystal clear. Carter's hands had started to shake. Just a tremor. But it was there. You had no right to dig through my accounts. Our accounts. The company accounts. Not just yours. I stared at him. For the first time since I'd met him, Carter looked genuinely unsure of himself. The neighbors weren't pretending anymore. Everyone was frozen. Even the kids had retreated to the edge of the lawn, sensing that the grown-ups were stepping on landmines. Lauren looked back and forth between us, panicked. Carter, she said again. What is she talking about? He opened his mouth, then closed it, because there was no simple lie left to tell. I took a step back, giving him space, letting the moment stretch out. Mitchell had told me that too. Let him paint himself into the corner. Finally, Carter sputtered. Claire is just angry. That's what this is about. Money. Yes, I said. What money? Lauren demanded. The house, I said. Everyone heard it. I kept my voice perfectly level. The house next door was paid for, in part, with cash from our retirement fund, and from the college savings account we built for Austin's grad school. A stunned silence crashed down over the backyard. John slowly shook his head. Martha whispered. Oh, my God. Lauren stared at Carter. Is that true? He looked at her, then at me, then down at the paper in his shaking hand. His voice cracked slightly. It's complicated. It's really not, I said. She's blowing it out of proportion, Carter yelled, finally losing his grip on the host persona. He crumpled the edge of the last page in his fist. You think you're going to ruin me over this? I think you already did it to yourself. His eyes burned into mine. You could have talked to me in private. I tried. When? Before you told me to serve your mistress. That sentence cut across the yard like a dropped glass shattering on tile. Lauren took a physical step backward. Martha's mouth literally fell open. Carter ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking 10 years older than he had 20 minutes ago. Claire, he hissed through his teeth. Are you making a scene? I looked around the yard slowly. Everyone was looking at him now. Not me. Him. I didn't make a scene, I said. You threw a party for it. He looked down at the paper again. Then, something shifted in his face. The anger flickered out, replaced by raw calculation. You don't want this to escalate, he said quietly. It won't help you either. It was the last card he had left to play. The mutual destruction threat. But Mitchell had prepared me for that too. It already escalated, I said. He froze. What does that mean? It means the paperwork has already been filed. He stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. The very last drop of color drained from his face. Around us, the smell of burnt meat drifted from the barbecue, where the burgers had been completely forgotten. Nobody moved to flip them. Nobody said a word. Carter slowly lowered the papers to his side. And for the first time since that Tuesday afternoon on the porch, when he told me to accommodate his betrayal, Carter looked like a man who finally understood that he was no longer writing the story. He stood there in the middle of the lawn, the divorce packet hanging loosely from his grip, while the smoke from the grill curled over his shoulder. The only sound was the sizzling of grease hitting the hot coals. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. A cicada buzzed in the branches of the maple tree above Lauren's head. But inside our yard, time had simply stopped. Carter looked down at the final page again, as if staring at it long enough would magically change the ink. You won't do anything with this, he said finally. The confidence in his voice was paper-thin now, entirely forced. I didn't answer immediately. I just watched him. After 27 years of marriage, you learn the topography of a person's face. You know the exact difference between anger and fear, between a bluff and genuine belief. This was a bluff. You might be right, I said softly. His shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, as if relief had just brushed past him. Then I added, but the IRS definitely will. The relief vanished. Lauren walked up to him, absolute panic written across her features. Carter, she pleaded, what is she talking about? He rubbed his forehead like a massive migraine had just hit him. Claire is overreacting. I tilted my head slightly. Am I? He didn't answer. Behind him, John cleared his throat and awkwardly shifted his weight. I saw Martha slowly set her paper plate down on the patio table, her potato salad entirely untouched. Nobody wanted to leave now, but nobody wanted to interrupt either. They were witnessing the exact moment a carefully curated suburban life disintegrated in public. Carter tried one last time. He dropped his voice to a ragged whisper and leaned toward me. You didn't have to do this here. I met his eyes. You brought her here. You invited the neighborhood. He flinched. Another beat of silence passed. The smell of charred burgers grew heavier in the humid air. Finally, Lauren spoke again, her voice tight and high. Carter, did you take money from her retirement fund? He didn't answer right away, and that hesitation told her more than any words could have. She stumbled back a step, as if someone had just yanked a rug out from under her feet. You told me the house was paid off, she whispered. It is, he snapped. With whose money? She demanded. The question floated over the grass. Carter's face twisted in sheer frustration. Everyone just calm down, he yelled, desperately trying to summon the authority of a host wrangling a rowdy party. This is getting blown completely out of proportion. But nobody moved toward the barbecue. Nobody chuckled. The illusion was dead. I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not joy exactly. Something quieter. Release. For months, I had carried the weight of suspicion, confusion, and betrayal completely alone. Now, the truth wasn't just in my head or tucked inside a manila folder in a downtown law office. It was out in the open, breathing the same air as the rest of us. Carter whipped back toward me. "What do you want?" he demanded. The question actually surprised me, because for the first time since the infidelity came to light, he wasn't giving an order. He was asking for an exit. "I want out of this," I said. "You already have that." He gestured wildly with the papers. "And now I have protection." He looked down at the last page again. I could practically see the gears grinding in his head, mentally reviewing bank records, wire transfers, all the dark corners his shortcuts would lead to if someone with a badge started asking questions. He swallowed hard. "Can you pull this back?" he asked. His voice was hollow. "I can fix it. I can put the money back." "With what money?" That hit him like a physical blow. For a second, he looked around the yard, almost instinctively searching for backup. But the neighbors universally avoided his gaze. John stared intently at the grass. Martha looked like she was praying to turn invisible. Carter had spent years building a reputation on this street-successful contractor, friendly guy, always willing to lend a power washer or recommend a good roofer. Now, every single person standing on his lawn was silently recalculating exactly who he was. The realization washed over him visibly. His shoulders slumped. Lauren backed further away from him, wrapping her arms protectively over her bump. "You told me everything was handled," she said quietly. Carter didn't answer her. Because there was nothing left to handle. The barbecue let out one final, loud hiss as a burger completely blackened and split open. Finally, John stepped forward, reached over, and twisted the knob on the propane tank, shutting off the gas. The sudden silence was deafening. I looked at Carter one last time. "I'm going inside," I said. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't say another word. I walked across the patio, up the porch steps, and into the house that had been my home for nearly 2 decades. When the heavy door clicked shut behind me, the air-conditioned silence inside felt almost sacred compared to the wreckage outside. I leaned my back against the door for a second, my hand still on the brass knob, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. That afternoon, the neighbors trickled away one by one. No music, no laughter, just awkward goodbyes and the soft thud of car doors closing. Carter never came inside. I watched him once through the kitchen blinds. He was sitting alone in a folding lawn chair, the divorce folder resting on his knees. He looked physically smaller. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Life didn't magically become easy after that. Divorce never works that way. The paperwork took months. The lawyers negotiated. The forensic accountants dug through the ledgers. Carter's business underwent far more scrutiny than he had ever anticipated. But the part that mattered most had already happened, the moment the truth ceased to be my exclusive burden. About 6 months later, I sold the house. It wasn't a sad decision. By then, Sarah had flown in from Boston and helped me sort through closets and the attic. Austin drove up from Chicago for a weekend and hauled furniture into a storage unit, carrying himself with that quiet, protective anger adult children develop when they realize their father has profoundly disappointed them. We didn't spend much time talking about Carter. There wasn't much left to say. I bought a nice 2-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park, with a little balcony that gets the morning sun, walking distance from a cafe that makes a cinnamon latte. I probably shouldn't drink as often as I do. The first morning I woke up there, the sunlight was streaming through the kitchen window onto completely empty countertops. No spreadsheets, no expectations for dinner, no tension. Just quiet. A few months after I moved, I ran into Lauren. It was at the Whole Foods in Hinsdale. She had a stroller with her. The baby was sleeping inside. For a second, we just stood there in the cereal aisle, both of us freezing, unsure of what the protocol was. Finally, she spoke. "I heard you moved." "I did." She nodded slowly. The baby made a small noise in the stroller, and she instinctively reached down to adjust the blanket. She looked tired. Not miserable, exactly, just worn down the way young people look when life turns out to be much vastly more complicated than they were promised. "You were right," she said after a moment. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. We wished each other well, awkwardly, and went our separate ways. And that was it. No screaming, no dramatic speeches. Just two women who had learned something the hard way. These days, my life is incredibly simple. Morning walks by the lake, phone calls with my kids, coffee dates with the few friends who stood by me through the fallout. Sometimes, people ask if I regret exposing Carter the way I did, doing it in front of the whole neighborhood. I always give the same answer. No, because the truth is, I didn't destroy his life. I just stopped And if there is anything I learned from all of this, it's that quiet strength can be far more devastating than anger. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to scream or throw plates. Sometimes, the most important moment of your life is when you calmly hand someone the last page and simply walk away.
Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection, now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone again. I'm freezing, I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile, every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here, maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.